Yo, what's up, guys? Solid win tonight for the Raptors on their first game back from All-Star break, guys, beating the Chicago Bulls 110-101, guys. Now, really solid game today for the Raptors, guys. Obviously, first game back from All-Star break, of course. Obviously, some guys might be a little bit rusty, of course, but not Brandon Ingram, guys. Brandon Ingram with a fantastic ball game tonight, guys. Brandon Ingram dropping 31 points tonight, 8 rebounds, 6 assists tonight, leading the Raptors to victory. B.I. had a fantastic game tonight for the Raptors offense. The Raptors had some really good quarters tonight defensively in this game tonight. Obviously, a little bit of worrying signs, of course, again in the fourth quarter. Raptors blowing leads again. Chicago clawing back, almost taking the lead again. But the Raptors tonight, guys, were able to hold the lead, get some stops defensively, make some baskets at the end of the game. Then they were able to close out this victory in the game tonight. Now, they start off the game well. You start off on a 10-2 run. They're moving the basketball well. Brandon Ingram comes out firing in the first half. He has 17 in the first half on 6 of 15 shooting. He was really shooting the ball well. Scottie had a really solid first half as well, having 10 points on 4 of 9 shooting with 4 rebounds. So Scottie and B.I. were obviously carrying the workload for the Raptors offensively in the first half. I thought Jacoby Walter was solid coming off the bench, having 6 points in the first half off 10 minutes of play. So Jacoby and Scottie and B.I. were really doing most of the work offensively. The Raptors did some really good things defensively. Of course, we saw CMB starting instead of Jakob Poeltl because Poeltl's obviously having a back injury, of course, having minutes restrictions, of course. So there's obviously a reason why CMB's playing. He's been great defensively for the Raptors. Athleticism has been incredible this year for the Raptors, for CMB, and he's just getting better and better at the center position, even though he's not a natural center. He has really filled in the void of Jakob Poeltl obviously being out the last couple months, and obviously starting in this game today, CMB had some really solid minutes defensively, of course, had some decent minutes in the first half, but only having 4 points on 2 of 2 shooting from the field, guys. Obviously, CMB's obviously not going to be one of the high-scoring guys on the team, but I thought he did some really good things defensively, moving the ball as well offensively. Mamu had some good points as well in the first half, only having 5 on 2 of 3 shooting, having a 3-pointer as well. Raptors bench didn't do very much in this game other than Jacoby Walter offensively. So it was a pretty quiet night from the bench. The Raptors bench was not as good as Chicago's bench tonight, but they did a good job tonight, the starting 5, carrying most of the workload offensively, even though IQ and RJ had a quiet first half, both having only 4 points as well. But defensively, the Raptors, like I said, were fantastic in this game, especially in the first half, forcing Chicago to turn the ball over 13 times, guys. Chicago had, like I said, 13 turnovers. Raptors had 16 points off those turnovers. So great job by the Raptors taking advantage of those turnovers by the Bulls. But the Bulls, weren't shooting the ball well in the first half, shooting 39% from the field, not shooting the ball well in the second quarter. First quarter, they were shooting the ball well, but then after they started to dip a bit, the Bulls were missing some open shots. Raptors took advantage of that. Raptors were out rebounding the Bulls, had more assists in the first half, had more steals as well, points in the paint. So the Raptors were winning on every facet in the first half, but the Bulls were hanging around, doing a really good job hanging around in the first half. They were making some shots. Simons was doing a really good job. He had 10 points in the first half. Okoro had 8. You had Sexton with 7. It doesn't matter what color jersey Colin Sexton's wearing. He's going to break the Raptors' chops anytime he plays them. So he had some good minutes off the bench. You had Richards, who had 4 points. Obviously, he had that little tussle there with RJ Barrett, of course. So obviously not a big deal there. And Buzelis had 4 points and 4 rebounds. So Raptors doing a good job keeping the Bulls at bay offensively, with their defense. But in the second half, it was a little bit of a different story, especially in the fourth quarter for the Bulls. But in the third quarter, Raptors had their best offensive quarter of the game, having 34 points in the third quarter. Doing a really good job offensively, making their baskets, had a couple threes. Jacoby, I felt, was really positive in this game today. Guys making a corner 3, driving the lane, cutting when he had the open lane, got some stops on defense. I thought Jacoby was fantastic in this game tonight, guys, off the bench for the Raptors. If you ask me, he was the brightest spot for this team off the bench. Grady Dick, another game where Grady Dick, fails to impress, missed that wide open layup in the first half. Jacoby now can run with the minutes that he has. With Ochai being gone, Grady Dick not taking advantage of his opportunities. I think Jacoby did a really good job tonight, taking advantage of the minutes that he was given to tonight, guys, scoring the way he did tonight, having 22 minutes to play, 14 points tonight for Jacoby. Really, really solid game for him. I really liked how he played throughout this game tonight, guys. But the third quarter, like I said, offensively was good for the Raptors, really doing a good job on Chicago there, guys. Chicago, they were having a good offensive quarter as well. They had 33 points in the third quarter, staying close to the Raptors, not letting this game get out of hand. Chicago did a good job keeping it close into the fourth quarter. Raptors, I felt, did a good job keeping that lead. They were up at 9 at one point near the end of the third, but Chicago, they found a way to cut the deficit. They went on like a 7-0 run near the end of the third, beginning of the fourth, made it difficult for the Raptors, starting to make me worry a little bit. Is this team going to blow another fourth quarter lead? And they almost did, ironically enough, this Raptors team, but they got stops defensively when they had to, got a couple blocks. CMB had that great closeout in the corner there on Simons as well. Brandon Ingram made some important shots, made that clutch shot, that mid-range shot there to make it an 8-point lead. They really sealed the deal for the Raptors there, guys, to get this win tonight. But Chicago, man, give them some credit, making some shots. They were pushing the ball in the fast break. They were getting some stops on defense. The Raptors were struggling at times shooting the ball in this game, guys. Really frustrating, again, as always, with this basketball team, missing three-pointers, missing open shots, open layups, little floaters. Obviously, there was some frustrations in this ball game tonight. But Brandon Ingram, like I said, came up clutch for the Raptors tonight, finishing off the game with 31 points tonight, guys, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. B.I. was facilitating the ball as well tonight. I really liked the ball movement. He was really moving the ball well tonight. Had that one pass to CMB. Really liked what I saw from B.I. tonight. Other than scoring, he was moving the basketball. Scotty didn't have a great second half, only having 14 points in total. Yeah, 10 in the first half, only having 4 in the second. Not very good offensively for Scotty, but obviously Scotty helps his team in other ways defensively, of course, guys, facilitating the basketball. Even though he did turn over the ball a couple times in this game tonight, Scotty wasn't the best tonight, but he helped the team in other ways, guys. Colin Murray Bulls had a solid game, 11 points. I'm still worried about that thumb of his, with that dunk he had, biting his thumb, Hopefully he's okay, man, but he's going to have to deal with that for the rest of the season. He's probably going to have to get surgery on it. I'm not a doctor. That's just a guess of mine, but 11 points and 6 rebounds for CMB on 4 of 5 shooting. A really good, efficient game for him, but love the kid's effort defensively, man. The kid just continues to show his presence defensively. Really love what this kid is doing for the Raptors this year, guys. Quickly finishes off with 14 on 5 of 12 shooting, not the best efficient night. Made a couple good shots tonight. Emmanuel quickly. RJ only having 13 on 3 of 10 shooting, not the best game for RJ Barrett. Of course, still want him to work on his free throws because he still misses at least a free throw or 2 a game. Drives me bloody nuts, of course. Jacoby, like I said, the best guy off the bench tonight for the Raptors with 14 and 4. Shed only had 4 points. 3 rebounds, and 4 assists. Jakob Poeltl only played 16 minutes, only having 2 points. Mamu only played 15, having 7. And then Grady only played 9 minutes with 0 points and 5 rebounds. So Grady Dick is just really having a bad year, to say the least, guys. So you had these guys here on the bench combined, okay? You had 27 points from Toronto's bench. Obviously, you would like a little bit more. Chicago's bench did outscore the Raptors in this game plan, guys. Chicago had some really good productive minutes tonight by obviously Simons, who had 20. Okoro had 16. You had Trey Jones with 12 off the bench. He had a really solid game with 6 assists as well. You had Sexton with 11, 1 and 12, and a rebound and 2 assists. Yasubele had 8 points and 5 rebounds off the bench there. So Chicago had some guys there that were really a pain in the Raptors, but it was mainly Sexton and Jones, guys. Those two combined for 23 points off the bench. So 2 guys combined for 23, and the Raptors had like 5 or 6 guys combined for 27, of course. Then you had, like I said, Yasube 8, Richard 6, Dillingham 4, Williams 6. So obviously it's close to 40 points there for the Chicago Bulls. So the Bulls did some really good things, but like I said, guys, Raptors obviously a little bit more of a mature team. The Bulls obviously made a lot of trades at the deadline. A young team, obviously they're still gaining chemistry with themselves, like making 7 trades, acquiring 7 new guys. So Chicago obviously has a little bit of a curve there, a learning curve with their new teammates. But the Raptors found a way to win this game tonight, guys. Good chemistry by the Raptors. Moving the ball well. Facilitating was good. Making their shots when they had to. Shooting 42% from the field. Obviously, you'd like that to be a little bit better. 30% from 3. Obviously, we want that to be better as well. 87% from the free throw line. That is not horrible at all. 55 rebounds apiece for both the Raptors and Bulls. So they were both equal on the glass tonight. Same with offensive rebounds as well. 11 offensive rebounds each. And the Raptors had 1 more assist compared to the Bulls, 23-22. So things were very even on the glass with the ball movement. The Raptors had 14 steals, though. compared to Chicago's 6. Chicago did a great job in the second half, guys. You know, obviously, 13 turnovers in the first half is a lot. You know, you had 10 in the second half, not as much in the first, but that's still quite a bit. But they were able to take care of the basketball most of all in the second half. You know, they turned the ball over like 3 times at the end of the fourth quarter there. So it was technically only 7 turnovers in the second half, but the Raptors got 3 more steals at the end of the game there to bump it up there. But Raptors 14 turnovers, obviously you want to limit that a little bit. 50 points in the paint compared to the Bulls 46, guys. 14 second chance points to the Bulls 9, 24 fast break points to the Bulls 19, and then 28 points off turnovers compared to the Bulls 19. So the Raptors and Bulls, they were pretty even in a lot of things, but the Raptors just made more shots, and the Raptors had Brandon Ingram, and the Chicago Bulls do not. That was the big difference in tonight's game. Brandon Ingram, whatever he wanted, he got tonight. Mid-range, drove the lane, made a couple threes tonight. You know, Brandon Ingram just, when he's in that mid-range form of his, you know, he is very difficult to stop, especially with his back to the basket, you know, with that fadeaway of his. You know, love his step back. You know, Brandon Ingram just shows what a great player he is, what a great mid-range player he is, especially. You know, this guy's mid-range game is elite, one of the best in the NBA, if you guys ask me. The Raptors record on the road, 17-10, 10 games over 500, guys. The official second half of the NBA season has started now. The Raptors have another couple months left before the playoffs to continue to get themselves in a top 5 placement. Of course, obviously, they're 5th in the East right now. Would like to get a top 4 spot to get home court advantage in the first round of the NBA playoffs, guys. The Raptors are a couple games back of the Cavaliers, but they got a game on Sunday, got a couple days off now to rest now. Obviously, All-Star weekend has passed. You know, Raptors now have to focus on these last couple months of the season, focus on the playoffs, but this is a solid win tonight. They got business done tonight. You have to win these games against these type of opponents tonight. The Raptors have done their job this year. Defeating the under 500 teams is your guys. It's the difficulties, obviously, against the top 10 teams in the NBA where the Raptors have their struggles. But a solid win tonight for the Raptors tonight, led by Brandon Ingram tonight, guys. We'll see how they do on Sunday. Solid performance for the Raptors tonight. We'll love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on this game tonight, guys. Like this video, subscribe if you guys want to see more content. Go Raptors, go as always, guys. See you guys on the next episode of Raptors Unfiltered. Ciao, guys.